The Rich Groom, The Poor Bride, and $1 Million Secret Part 2. Chapter 9, Whispers in the Dark. It was nearly midnight when Alejandro returned to the penthouse. The hallway lights were dim, casting golden slashes across the floor. The world outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was silent, the city distant and blurred behind glass like a painting too expensive to touch. He loosened his tie as he walked in, his jaw tight, mind still tangled in the day's meeting, Vanessa's smirk, and the gnawing feeling that something unseen was shifting beneath his feet. He hadn't expected to see light coming from the guest room. And he certainly hadn't expected to hear the faintest sound of sobbing. He moved toward the open door silently. Inside, the light was low, just a small lamp glowing on the nightstand. Camila sat on the edge of the bed, her back to the door, her hands covering her face. She didn't hear him. Not at first. Her shoulders shook barely, but enough. Her breath came in small, jagged pulls like someone trying to cry without making noise. Alejandro froze in the doorway, unsure of himself. He had never been the kind of man who comforted people. He didn't offer tissues or platitudes. He conquered, corrected, controlled. He didn't hold pain, he buried it. But there she was. And something about seeing her like that strong, defiant Camila Rivera, cracked open when no one was looking, hit him with force he hadn't prepared for. He knocked lightly on the door frame. Camila's head jerked up, her eyes wide. She swiped at her face quickly, pushing her hair back and smoothing her shirt in one frantic motion. I didn't hear you, she said, voice hoarse. Alejandro stepped inside, hands in his pockets. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, softer than usual. Less sharp. I wasn't trying to sneak up on you. Camila shook her head, composing herself. I'm fine. It's just a long day. Alejandro looked at her carefully. Vanessa. Her spine stiffened. She's not worth the energy. He studied her for a long moment. Then why are you crying? She gave a brittle laugh. I'm not crying. He said nothing. She sighed and turned her gaze to the lamp. The glow caught the shimmer of tears still clinging to her lashes. I'm tired, she said finally. This world, your world, it's sharp. Cold. Everyone watches me like I'm the twist in a bad plot line. I can't breathe without someone questioning my motives. Her voice trembled. I never asked for this. I just wanted to survive. He stepped closer, slowly. You didn't cry when my mother insulted you. Or when Vanessa cornered you. Or when Esteban tried to humiliate you in front of 200 people. But now, when you're alone, you break. Camila looked away. That's how I survive. Quietly. Alejandro's jaw flexed. Something inside him shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Camila, he said, voice quieter now. Are you okay? It was the first time he'd asked. The first time his words sounded less like commands and more like concern. She hesitated. This was the moment. She could tell him. About Rafael. About the baby. About the truth wrapped in scar tissue and silence. She opened her mouth. And lied. I'm fine. A pause. Alejandro nodded once. Okay. He didn't press. He just stood there a moment longer, then said, you don't have to fight everything alone. Not here. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The door closed with a soft click. Camila sat motionless for several seconds, the tears falling again, silent, invisible. She had lied. Because he couldn't know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some truths ruined everything. And some lies were the only thing keeping her world intact. Chapter 10, Unlikely Affection. The rain started in the early evening, soft at first, like a whisper on glass. By nightfall, it was a storm. Thunder rolled across the city skyline like an angry god clearing his throat. Lightning cracked against the dark clouds, illuminating the penthouse windows in violent flashes. Wind howled against the towering glass like it was trying to claw its way inside. Camila stood barefoot by the balcony, a cup of untouched tea warming her hands. She had turned off all the lights. The storm lit the room in strobe pulses, light, then shadow, light, then shadow. She had always loved storms. They made the world feel honest. No pretending. No forced smiles. Just chaos in its purest form. And tonight, that felt right. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Alejandro stepped into the room without saying a word. He had removed his jacket, his sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. His hair was damp. He must have been out on the terrace, and there was something different in his posture. Not the usual rigid arrogance. Something quieter. "Can't sleep?" she asked, not turning around. "Didn't try." She smiled faintly and sipped her tea. He came to stand beside her at the glass, hands in his pockets. Together, they watched as a fork of lightning split the sky. It lit the city in silver for one breathless second. "This tower was built to sway with the wind," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "That's not comforting?" He chuckled under his breath. "No, I suppose it's not." The silence between them wasn't awkward. Not anymore. It had become something else. An unspoken agreement. Neither of them trusted easily. But here, with no one watching, they didn't have to pretend. Camila glanced at him. In the pale flickers of lightning, his features were softer. He looked tired. Human. Like a man shouldering too many expectations and too little forgiveness. She found herself saying something she hadn't planned. "When I was a little girl, I used to think thunder was God moving furniture." Alejandro's lips quirked. "That's oddly specific." "My grandmother told me that," she said. She'd say, "Shhh, listen, he's shifting the chairs again." I used to picture this grumpy old man in the sky knocking over tables. Alejandro laughed, really laughed, and she startled at the sound. It was warm, full. Nothing like the cold, clipped chuckles he gave at business functions. She smiled in spite of herself. A beat passed. "You don't talk about your family much," he said quietly. Camila's breath caught. Here it was. The edge of the truth. The place where the past wanted to crawl into the room and sit beside her. "I don't have much family left," she said, eyes on the storm. He nodded but didn't press. And that made her want to tell him more. Her voice softened. "There was a time when I thought I was going to have my own family. Just me and someone small. Someone who needed me." He turned to look at her. Her fingers gripped the mug a little tighter. "It didn't happen. Life doesn't always work out the way you imagine." She felt him watching her. "Camila." She looked at him, really looked. And in that moment, under lightning and glass and the fragile illusion of peace, she almost said it. Almost. The baby. The hospital. Raphael. The name she had buried so deep it hurt to even think it. But then Alejandro's expression changed. That wall came back. The one that lived just behind his eyes. That wall that said, "This man does not break easily, and he does not forgive easily, either." Camila blinked, and the moment passed. She pulled back from the edge of confession and wrapped herself back in silence. "Never mind," she said lightly. "It's in the past." Alejandro looked at her a second longer, like he knew there was more. But he said nothing. Outside, the storm intensified. Rain battered the glass, thunder rattled the sky, and lightning turned the room silver blue. And yet, they stood there together. Not as strangers. Not as husband and wife, not really. But as two broken people, briefly unguarded, under a sky too wild to care about secrets. Chapter 11, Camila's Confidant. The De la Vega estate was quieter than usual, unsettlingly so. Isabella de la Vega wandered through the East Wing library with a cup of lukewarm coffee in one hand and curiosity tangled in the other. Her instincts, finely tuned from a lifetime of living among schemers and politicians masquerading as relatives, were whispering now. And they were whispering about Camila. It wasn't that Isabella didn't like her new sister-in-law. She actually did. Camila had grit. She didn't fawn over wealth, didn't beg for attention, and didn't bite when provoked. But there was something else. Something she couldn't name yet. A weight behind Camila's eyes. The way her smile never quite reached her soul. And then there was the thing Vanessa had mentioned at the gala. She disappeared for 6 months. No job history. No family listed. No social media. It wasn't a throwaway insult. Vanessa didn't do throwaway. Every barb was a breadcrumb. And Isabella, ever the bloodhound for truth, followed it. Isabella sat at her laptop, the estate's private network humming quietly. She knew how to dig. Years of boredom at elite schools and a rebellious streak had made her an amateur sleuth. Digital footprints, backdated records, online archives. She could do more with a Google search than some hired investigators. She started with Camila's name, Camila Teresa Rivera. There were the usual hits: her current ID, a work record from the diner, a hospital filing for a sprained ankle 5 months ago. But everything before that was foggy. No social security number until 2 years ago. No bank accounts prior to that. Nothing under her legal name existed before her move to the city. Isabella narrowed her eyes. Now that's interesting. She ran a cross-reference search using key data points, age range, general location history, and the few personal details Camila had shared in passing, mentioning a grandmother in the south, her time as a barista in a smaller city. Within minutes, Isabella found it. Teresa Calderon. A photo popped up on a community college newsletter, fuzzy, low quality, but unmistakable. Camila, 2 years younger, smiling with a group of students outside a nursing building. She'd changed her last name. She'd dropped her first name. And she'd vanished. Isabella leaned back in her chair, stunned. Why would Camila erase herself? There were no public criminal records. No articles. No lawsuits. Nothing scandalous. Just silence. A dead digital trail. The kind people only leave when they are running. And Isabella didn't think Camila was running from crime. She was running from pain. Isabella found Camila outside, tending to one of the rose planters with surprising care. Camila didn't jump when Isabella approached. She simply looked up and offered a small smile. Didn't know you liked flowers, Isabella said. I didn't used to, Camila replied. But these ones, they survive in spite of being moved, trimmed, forced to grow where they weren't planted. I respect that. Isabella sat on the stone bench nearby, silent for a moment. Then, gently, who's Teresa Calderon? Camila froze. Her fingers tightened around the garden shears. She turned slowly, eyes wide, but composed. Where did you hear that name? I found an old college newsletter, Isabella said carefully. You were smiling. Different hairstyle, but same eyes. A long silence settled between them. Camila set the shears down and walked to the railing. You shouldn't have dug into that. I had to, Isabella said. You're married to my brother. And, you matter to me. But you've got this wall up like you're hiding from a war no one else can see. Camila's voice, when it came, was barely audible. Teresa Calderon doesn't exist anymore? Why not? Another pause. Then Camila looked at her. There was no anger in her expression, only exhaustion. Because Teresa trusted someone she shouldn't have, she said. She believed in something that broke her. And when it was over, there was nothing left worth keeping. Isabella's throat tightened. Camila. I lost everything. My name, my future, my hope. I had to start over. Reinvent. Build a new life without the pieces of the old one. Isabella sat quietly, heart aching. You don't have to tell me more. But I want you to know. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you carry whatever it is. If you ever want to share it. Camila blinked, clearly startled. For a long second, she didn't say anything. Then, softly, she whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time since they met, she looked at Isabella like she wasn't an enemy or an obstacle. She looked at her like a friend. But even friendship couldn't erase the shadow of the past. Camila walked away a few minutes later, heart thudding, the name Teresa Calderon echoing in her chest like a warning. Because once a secret is rediscovered, it's only a matter of time before it demands to be told. Chapter 12, The Photo. It started with something innocent. Alejandro was searching for a charger. He had left his phone on the kitchen counter to die a slow digital death during a tense call with a legal team, and now, mildly annoyed and vaguely restless, he walked toward the guest room, Camila's room, to borrow a spare. She wasn't home. She had gone to visit a local community center for one of the De la Vega Foundation's initiatives, something she had requested to do alone. He hadn't asked questions, only nodded. But the truth was, lately, he noticed when she was gone. It unsettled him. Alejandro rapped lightly on the door, out of habit more than courtesy, then stepped inside. The guest room was tidy, almost too tidy. Impersonal. As though she was afraid to leave a trace. No photographs on the wall. No books on the nightstand. The only thing that suggested a woman lived there was a pale green shawl draped over the armchair and a single tube of lipstick left out on the vanity. The drawer of the nightstand was slightly ajar. He bent to look for a cable, and that's when he saw it. A photo. Folded. Creased at the corners. Hidden under a small, worn notebook. Alejandro paused, hand hovering. He shouldn't. But he did. He picked it up and unfolded it. And the world changed. It was taken on a quiet street corner, low resolution, clearly candid. A younger Camila stood beside a man. His face was turned slightly, but even in profile, Alejandro recognized him. Rafael. His brother. But that wasn't the worst part. Camila's hand was resting on her abdomen, round, unmistakably pregnant. Rafael's hand covered hers, his expression one of easy charm, of practiced affection. Alejandro stared at the image, his heartbeat slowing, then accelerating. A baby. His brother. Camila. A sudden, disorienting swirl of thoughts rushed in. His first instinct, this can't be real. His second, why would she hide this? He sat on the bed, still gripping the photograph. He studied it again. Camila wasn't smiling in it. That detail struck him like a hook. She looked almost uncertain. Rafael, on the other hand, looked confident. Possessive. Alejandro swallowed hard. Everything inside him wanted to storm out, demand answers, call her back, shatter the fragile understanding they'd been building. But something stopped him. A flicker of restraint. A whisper of her voice in the storm. There was a time when I thought I was going to have my own family. She hadn't lied, not completely. She had almost told him. Almost. Alejandro set the photo down, his hand shaking slightly for reasons he couldn't explain. Not from betrayal. Not yet. From the not knowing. And worse, the possibility that she had once loved Rafael. That she might still. He stood up quickly, as if the bed burned. The photo stared back from the nightstand, silent and damning. He picked it up again and put it back exactly where it had been. Covered. Folded. Like a truth not yet spoken aloud. Camila returned just after 8, a little wind-blown, cheeks flushed from the chilly air. Alejandro was in the living room with a drink in hand. He didn't look up right away. Didn't ask about the center. Didn't comment on her soft humming as she kicked off her heels. Did something happen today, she asked, sensing the shift in him. He looked up, eyes unreadable. Not really. Are you sure? You seem off. He studied her for a long beat. She looked sincere. Comfortable. At ease. How could she lie so well? I just have a lot on my mind, he said simply. She nodded, accepting it. She didn't press. And that, somehow, made it worse. Because Alejandro De la Vega for the first time in years felt like he was the one carrying the secret. He sipped his drink and watched her move through the apartment like a woman who didn't know the past was about to catch up to her. But the photo in the drawer said otherwise. And now that he had seen it, there was no going back. Chapter 13, Camila's Secret. The evening was unusually still. No thunder. No wind. Just the oppressive quiet of something inevitable drawing near. Camila stood at the kitchen island, chopping vegetables with deliberate care. Her hands moved mechanically, but her thoughts spun. Alejandro had barely spoken to her all day. He hadn't been cruel or dismissive, just distant. Calculating. Watching her in that careful, unreadable way he did when negotiating deals or dismantling opposition. Except this time, she felt like the opposition. She could feel it, something had shifted. And she knew, deep down, it had to do with the past. The door clicked behind her as Alejandro entered. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, tie loosened. He looked tired in a way she didn't often see, less from lack of sleep and more from carrying too many unanswered questions. Do you want wine? She offered, her voice too casual. No, he said, crossing the room. But I want something. She turned to him slowly. He leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on her. Camila. I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly. Her heart jumped. All right. He paused. Too long. Then, why did you disappear 2 years ago? Camila's breath caught. Alejandro's tone remained even. No accusations. No traps. I just want to understand. She set the knife down. The air between them tightened. She hadn't planned on telling him, not like this. Not without time, or preparation, or the safety of emotional distance. But he had asked. And for reasons she couldn't name, she wanted to tell him the truth. At least, part of it. She took a slow breath. I was pregnant. Alejandro's face didn't change, but she saw the flicker behind his eyes, shock, pain, or something else. She continued, voice soft. It wasn't planned. It wasn't wanted, by him. But it happened. Alejandro said nothing. Camila swallowed. I was working in another city then. I didn't have much, but I thought I could do it. I thought maybe it would give my life purpose. She closed her eyes briefly. But at 11 weeks, the pain started. They rushed me to the hospital. I lost the baby. Alejandro's breath hitched, just faintly. It was an ectopic pregnancy, she said. I almost died. Emergency surgery. Blood transfusion. I was unconscious for 2 days. Silence. Heavy and unmoving. Camila's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter. I never got to hold it, she whispered. I never got to bury anything. It just ended. Alejandro's voice was barely audible. And the father? She looked up slowly. A moment passed. And then she lied by omission. He left when I told him, she said. Disappeared. Pretended it wasn't his problem. He didn't come to the hospital. Never checked if I survived. Alejandro turned away, just slightly. His hand flexed at his side. She couldn't read his expression. Couldn't see if the photo had pushed him this far. Couldn't tell what he was thinking. But what she could see was hurt. Raw and unspoken. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked. Because it's not something I parade around. Because it's not part of this deal. Because it hurts. A pause. Because I didn't want you to look at me like I'm broken? Alejandro looked back at her then. Something in his gaze had shifted, less suspicion, more sorrow. I don't think you're broken, he said. And the way he said it, quiet, certain, almost undid her. She blinked quickly, willing the tears not to come. He took a slow step closer. Thank you, for telling me. Camila nodded, afraid to speak. He didn't ask for the man's name again. And she didn't offer it. Because saying Rafael's name would detonate everything. She had told the truth, but only enough to survive it. She watched Alejandro walk away, knowing this fragile thread of trust was stretching thin. And eventually, it would snap. Because the secret still lived between them louder than ever. Chapter 14, The Cousin's Coup. Esteban de la Vega believed in two things, power and timing. And right now, he was closing in on both. He sat in his private office at the Valencia Country Club, a glass of 50-year-old scotch in one hand, a thick dossier in the other. His manicured fingers flipped through the pages with cruel satisfaction. Camila Teresa Rivera. Also known briefly as Teresa Calderon. Unmarried. Once pregnant. Hospitalized at 24 for emergency surgery. No father listed. No family contacts. No stable residence until 18 months ago. He smirked. All the pieces had finally clicked. Vanessa's suggestion, softly whispered into his ear with venomous sweetness, had lit the fuse. If you want to break Alejandro's little marriage scam, start with her past. There's more there than cheap perfume and bargain heels. So he had. And what he found wasn't just useful, it was explosive. He took a long sip of his drink, savoring the moment. Alejandro was in a meeting with his legal team when he received the message. From Esteban. We need to talk. Unless you'd prefer the board to find out your wife's secrets first. He stared at the screen, his fingers curling tightly around his pen. He knew Esteban well enough to understand what wasn't written. This wasn't a bluff. This was a threat. And Alejandro had no doubt Esteban had something. His mind immediately went to the photo in Camila's drawer. The child. Rafael. Had Esteban found out about the connection? Was that what this was about? He ended the meeting early and texted Camila. Be home by 7. Something's come up. We need to talk. Alejandro didn't knock. He never did when it came to Esteban. His cousin looked up from his desk, smug as ever. I was wondering how long it would take you to show up, Esteban said, motioning toward a chair. Scotch. Alejandro ignored the offer. What do you have? Esteban grinned, flipping the dossier around and sliding it across the table. Your wife, of course. Or should I say, the woman formerly known as Teresa Calderon. Alejandro didn't touch the folder. He didn't need to. What do you want? He asked, voice low. Simple. I want you out of the inheritance race. Step back from the board vote next month. End this farce of a marriage quietly. And walk away with your dignity intact. Alejandro's jaw flexed. You're threatening me with something she already told me. Esteban arched a brow. Did she also tell you the father of that baby was Rafael? Alejandro didn't move, but a muscle twitched near his eye. A flicker Esteban didn't miss. Oh, Esteban said slowly, delighted. So you didn't know? Alejandro's silence said more than words. Esteban sat back, triumphant. Imagine how the board will respond when they find out the woman you fell in love with is the same woman who slept with your brother and tried to bury the evidence. It's a scandal just waiting to bleed across the headlines. Alejandro clenched his fists. You'll destroy her? No, Esteban said coolly. You already did that when you married her for your own gain. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Alejandro stood abruptly, fury radiating off him. If you do this, he warned, you're not just going after her. You're going after me. Esteban smiled. That's the idea? Camila arrived home just before 7, as asked. She noticed Alejandro's silence immediately. He didn't greet her. Didn't look up from the window where he stood, arms crossed. Something happened, she said. He turned slowly. His eyes were unreadable but not cold. Just heavy. Esteban knows, he said. Camila froze. His voice didn't rise. He has the hospital records. The photo. The names. She felt her throat tighten, her body going cold. And Rafael? Alejandro nodded once. Tears welled in her eyes, not because she was ashamed. She was past that. But because the truth had finally come for her. And now, she might lose everything. Alejandro stepped closer. Why didn't you tell me? Camila swallowed hard. Because it would change everything. I thought if I left it buried, we could keep pretending. You think this was pretending? She looked at him. Really looked. I didn't want it to be, she whispered. A long pause. Alejandro turned away again, jaw clenched, hands fists. Outside the glass, the city lights shimmered like scattered fire. And above them all, Esteban waited ready to burn everything down. Chapter 15, A Marriage Realized. The night pressed heavy over the penthouse, silent, suffocating, still. Alejandro stood by the window, arms folded tightly across his chest, eyes cast over the glinting city skyline. But he wasn't really seeing any of it. His mind spun in 1,000 unspoken directions. Behind him, Camila sat curled on the sofa, silent, her hands clasped so tightly they had gone pale. The weight of the truth, or at least the part she'd allowed him to see, hung between them like an exposed nerve. She had tried to run from her past. She'd buried it. Hidden it behind silence, misdirection, half-truths. But now that Esteban had unearthed it, there was no more hiding. Alejandro's voice, when it finally came, was low but clear. Tell me everything? Camila nodded once. Slowly. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. Only the truth would keep him from walking away now. She stood, walked to him but kept a careful distance. I met him when I was 24, she began softly. He was charming, rich, dangerous. The kind of man who always knew what to say. At first, I thought it was just a distraction, but I was lonely. Desperate to feel like I mattered to someone. Alejandro's jaw tensed slightly. We didn't plan anything. And when I told him I was pregnant, he vanished. Told me it wasn't his problem. That I should take care of it. She drew a breath. I didn't. I wanted that baby, Alejandro. Even if I was terrified. Even if I had nothing. I still wanted to try. He said nothing, but she could see his hands unclenching slightly. Camila turned away for a moment, gathering herself. I ended up in the hospital. It was a tubal rupture. Emergency surgery. I nearly died. They told me afterward I might not be able to have children again. That my body would recover, but not all of it. Alejandro's gaze dropped, his features unreadable. Camila swallowed hard. That was the moment my life stopped belonging to me. After I got out, I changed my name. Moved. Started over. Teresa Calderon died in that hospital bed. She turned to face him again. I became Camila Rivera because I had to survive. Not to lie. Not to deceive. Just to keep breathing. A heavy silence settled between them. She had said everything except the one thing that still remained unspoken. She didn't say the father's name. She didn't say Rafael. Alejandro looked up, his voice distant but laced with something deeper now. Do you still love him? Camila blinked. No. I never really did. I love the idea of what we might be. Not the man he was. He met her eyes then. For the first time in days, truly met them. I believe you, he said. Camila's shoulders sagged in relief, but he wasn't finished. I hated that you kept this from me, he said. Not because of your past. But because I didn't want to realize I cared until it was almost too late. Her breath caught. I told myself this was a contract, Alejandro continued. A performance. But then you defended me. Kissed me at that gala. Faced my mother without flinching. Fought Vanessa without claws. A faint, dry smile touched his lips. And then you broke when no one was watching. You cried in the dark like someone who's been surviving alone for too long. Camila's voice shook. You weren't supposed to see that. I'm glad I did. He stepped closer. No matter what this started as, he said, it's not just a deal anymore. Her eyes widened slightly. Then what is it? He reached out gently, cautiously, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I know I don't see you as just the contract. Not anymore. Her heart thundered in her chest. Alejandro. He shook his head softly. I'm not ready to give you everything. I don't even know if I can. But I want to try. Tears slipped down her cheek quiet, disbelieving. This was no grand confession of love. This was something more dangerous. Hope. Because now they had crossed the line. What had started as deception was no longer pretend. And once hearts enter into business deals, someone always ends up broken. But maybe, just maybe this time they could both survive. Chapter 16, The Inheritance Clock. Time was no longer a distant concept. It had become a drumbeat, ticking louder with each passing day. There was exactly 30 days left until Alejandro's 30th birthday, the deadline etched into Don Ernesto de la Vega's ironclad wool. By that date, Alejandro had to remain legally married or risk forfeiting everything: the inheritance, the controlling shares, the power of the de la Vega name. 30 days to prove his marriage to Camila was real. 30 days to fend off Esteban's waiting knife. 30 days to either save his legacy or lose it all. The room was sleek and sharp, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a 12-foot mahogany table, and a long row of influential men and women in designer suits. These were the board members of the La Vega International, the stewards of the family's empire. Alejandro entered with calm authority, flanked by Diego, his longtime legal advisor. Esteban was already there, seated at the far end like a king in waiting. He wore a navy suit with an emerald pocket square, more for drama than taste, and smiled like a man who had already won. I've called this meeting, Esteban began smoothly, to discuss urgent developments that could impact the stability of our leadership. Alejandro raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware there was instability. Oh, cousin, Esteban replied, his grin curving wider, I think it's time we all stop pretending your little marriage hasn't raised questions. Especially in light of new evidence. He gestured, and an assistant brought forward a binder slim, sleek, lethal. Esteban opened it and spread several photos across the table. Camila laughing outside the diner she used to work in. Camila rushed into an emergency room, her face pale, her belly slightly swollen. Camila arm in arm with Raphael, years ago, their bodies unmistakably close. And in the last photo, her hand protectively over her abdomen, Raphael's hand over hers. "Let me be very clear," Esteban said, voice calm, eyes sharp. Alejandro's wife, this woman he supposedly married for love, is a former waitress who changed her name after a highly publicized pregnancy scare with his own estranged brother. Gasps circled the room. She rebranded herself, hid the scandal, and conveniently resurfaced just in time to marry into the family. Does that not seem like manipulation to anyone else? A board member, Mr. Ferreira, cleared his throat. "Is this verified?" "Fully," Esteban said. "I've included the hospital record, the timeline, and the ID change request. There's no denying it, Camila Rivera is Teresa Calderon. And if we are to believe the letter of Don Ernesto's will, the marriage required to meet his conditions must be based on integrity, not deception." Alejandro didn't flinch. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with cool precision. "Are you done?" Esteban leaned back. "For now." Alejandro's gaze swept across the room. "My wife's past is not a crime. It's not even a scandal. It's survival. Yes, she changed her name. She rebuilt her life. So did I." He paused. "But you know what she didn't do? Sell out her family name for a headline. She didn't manipulate this board. She didn't cozy up to dying men for a slice of their will." That one hit hard. Esteban's smile twitched. Alejandro stepped closer to the table, his voice steely. "You can try to spin it. But the clause in the will requires that I be married by the deadline. And I am." "Barely," Esteban snapped. "For now. I'm married. Period." A tense silence followed. Mr. Ferreira finally spoke again. "We'll review the documents. But the clause does not mention romantic legitimacy. Only legal status. Unless proof of fraud is brought forward, this is not disqualifying." Alejandro turned to leave. Esteban spoke behind him, voice a dagger. "Tick-tock, cousin. 30 days left. I only need one to ruin you." Alejandro didn't turn. But inside, his blood simmered. Camila sat at the edge of the bed, waiting. Alejandro had sent her a simple text, "Boardroom." Esteban made his move. He came home past midnight, looking like the war had only just begun. She stood the moment he entered. What did he do? He went public. To the board. "With your past. Raphael." The photo. Her breath caught. "He's trying to claim the marriage violates the spirit of the will?" She closed her eyes. Alejandro crossed to her, hands on her shoulders. "He's not going to win? You don't know that." "I know what matters," he said. "And for now, the board is holding. But this changes the game. No more mistakes. No more secrets. We have to be airtight." She nodded. "Then tell me what to do." He paused. And then he took her hand. "Stay," he said. "Don't run. Not again. I need you with me until the end." Her eyes welled, but she nodded. The inheritance clock had begun to toll its final hours. And from here on out, one false step could end it all.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself. Share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.